Hey guys, I'm here today with Gabriel L, and we're discussing The Batman.
I'm vengeance.
Whoa! This guy's crazy!
You're part of this too. How am I part of it? You'll see.
Hey there.
Hey, so The Batman came out not that long ago, in 2022, and I recently saw it, and I know that Gabriel here is a bit of a Batman buff, so I think hopefully we're going to have an interesting conversation about maybe more in-depth things than I would have picked up on the film. So right off the bat, I guess let's start talking about the main feature of the new Batman movie, which is the main actor, who is the star of the Twilight films.
Yeah, we got the good old Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson. So I guess let's just dive right into it. I want to make this podcast a little more laid back because I have thoughts on the movie, and I just want it to be an enjoyable conversation. It doesn't have to be, super professional or whatever. Just hopefully a fun, laid back conversation about the movie. So Robert Pattinson, do you think, what were your thoughts on him in The Batman? Do you think he was miscast? Do you think he did an all right representation of Batman? And just what are your thoughts on him being cast as the Batman?
I kind of felt like you could have put anybody in this version of the suit and with this director, and it might have been a similar story, but I think it's difficult to tell which one is more relevant, but I'd say he was miscast and he was also given nothing to do in the film.
Right. You think that Batman was sort of underwritten as maybe a character that I didn't have much acting to do or didn't have to display much emotion? Is that what you're saying?
I feel like they did a whole bunch of things strangely. So it's that the character didn't seem to have much to do in terms of how he was written, in terms of building a character, and also just what he does in the film itself. It's the whole character of Batman kind of comes off as vague. So the way he was written, how he's being played by the actor, nothing about this interpretation worked for me.
Right. I didn't notice it so much. I really didn't have a problem with it, maybe just because it wasn't a part that required that much emotional acting. But to me, the character of Batman, as well as the character of Bruce Wayne, were both super aloof characters. I kind of have in my mind an image of Bruce Wayne being sort of like a talkative, very popular person. In this version of Batman, Bruce Wayne is almost like a man-child who, just doesn't want to be seen in public and doesn't want to talk to anyone. It's kind of like a goth teenager, just staying to himself. Do you have any thoughts on how they portrayed Bruce Wayne in this film?
Those were the rumors early on that we were going to get an emo version of the Batman, which suffices to say is not really what anybody wanted to hear. So I guess I was prepared for that.
Did it bother you that he seemed like, as Bruce Wayne, sort of just almost like a rich, petulant child? Did it bother you that the portrayal of him as Bruce Wayne was someone who just didn't really interact with people?
Yes, this interpretation of the character is not, from what I can tell, not one that's been really done before, and it's unfamiliar. Like, I understand from what I've heard, and from what I've seen, that this was intentional. Matt Reeves, the director, was trying to give us an earlier, less sophisticated version of the Batman, someone who's young and kind of early on in his career and is kind of rough around the edges. So I kind of got where they were coming from, but I still didn't. I didn't like the character. I didn't like, even though I knew that's what they were going for. Like in the scenes when he's giving Alfred lip, it came off as over the top in a way that just doesn't seem like Batman. It doesn't seem like something the character would do.
Right. Okay. Now going on with some of the other casting choices, Commissioner Gordon was played by Jeffrey Wright, who I saw him in Westworld. Did you like Mr. Wright as Commissioner Gordon?
I kind of liked the way he looked, but that was about it. I enjoy that actor. I've seen him in other movies, TV shows. This movie, it seemed almost like he was playing a caricature of what the character is supposed to be, some kind of cliche.
Right, I hear. And just moving along the list, the Riddler was played by Paul Dano. I don't know if I've seen him in anything. Do you have any thoughts on the portrayal of the Riddler? And then I'll tell you what I thought.
Well, as far as actors go, I like Paul Dano. I think he does a good job in everything he's in, and is always, giving kind of slightly off the cuff types of performances for out of this box characters. I think he did well in the role. Like, I think his acting was on point. I like what he was doing, but the entire character the majority of this character seemed very derivative. Like, there are scenes that are just so similar to The Dark Knight. The exposition of the main villain via television torturing his victims. It was just it was like they just borrowed it straight from the other movies.
Right,
I didn't really feel like they developed that character properly.
Right. Yeah, you make an excellent point there. I only saw The Dark Knight once. Was The Dark Knight is the second of the 3 Nolan films?
Yeah.
I only saw The Dark Knight once, but yeah, when I was watching this movie, I'm like, yeah, this seems very much like a Nolan character in the way that he's portrayed, and in the way that they're kind of trying to make the villains a little more lifelike, as opposed to earlier iterations of Batman films where the villains are just so wacky and zany. They're kind of hard to conjure as real people. I really think he did a great job in the part. Like you really sort of feel he's a psychotic character. Maybe so much so that he seems a little bit more like the Joker than the Riddler might be. So I don't know. Maybe they're trying to mesh together both of those characters into one. Although the Joker does seem to make an appearance all the way at the end of the film. And while we're talking about characters, did you have any thoughts on the Catwoman who, going into this film, I didn't watch any trailers. I had no idea she was going to be in it. Was Catwoman a good addition to this film? Anything you liked or disliked about her?
Like many of the characters and the performances in this movie, I found her to be very kind of vague, kind of dull. Someone who didn't really interest me. Like the chemistry between her and Batman didn't feel real. And her as a character just... I was just kind of bored. In terms of the costume, I guess it was all right. I thought the ski mask looked silly.
Yeah, same here.
The costume.
Yeah, it was like she had this whole professional costume, and then she just kind of wore a silly ski mask on top. It was like a mix between professional and amateur, which was odd.
I think it's impossible not to compare this film to the Nolan trilogy because of just how much it borrows and also like directly, and how much, just how close it is in time to those movies.
Right. So before we get too far into the Nolan ones, maybe let's take a step back before we explore that, and let's talk about camera work. There's a lot of shots in this movie that I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like the frame is just a hallway, and there's a bunch of people in the hallway, like scenes at the police station where Batman's coming through this hallway, and you just see the hallway, and the Batman's surrounded by a ton of people. It's like these claustrophobic shots where, everyone seems very large and up front and in your face, and Batman has all these like upfront scuffles. There's a lot of scenes like that in this movie. So that's one thing I wanted to discuss. And the other thing was the fighting scenes are also kind of similar, where you just have a few like very large characters up close, hitting people, almost kind of like like Godzilla fighting a monster, or another monster. I guess he's a monster. What did you think? Do you have any thoughts on the cinematography or the things I mentioned, pros, cons, or anything else you'd like to add that stood out to you?
Well, as a disclaimer, I feel like I have to watch this again just as a refresher, because it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen it. The cinematography both stands out. It stands out for different reasons. Sometimes because it's very good, and other times because it's let's say lacking. So there are scenes that I appreciated the way they looked, and other ones not so much. That's most of what I've got to say about the cinematography.
Right.
It's kind of a mixed experience like the rest of the movie.
Right. Okay. So the fighting, what did you think about the fight scenes in the movie?
I thought the fight scenes in the movie were competent, like technically well done, but not particularly memorable.
Right. Same here. Batman, it seems like a more realistic, they're trying to portray a more realistic type of fighting where, Batman hits, but he also gets hit at the same time. But, he just keeps going. he also seems to be bulletproof. He gets shot a lot. I don't know if that was the case in the Nolan movies. But he's definitely not this character that just, comes into a room with 10 guys and, pow, 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 they're all on the ground. It's like, he has to slug through the fights. It's kind of like these burdensome fight scenes that some people might like. Are you into the more burdensome fight scenes or the more like pow, 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 everyone's on the ground?
I guess somewhere in between is a sweet spot. There's a scene at the end of Batman versus Superman where Batman takes down like two floors worth of thugs, and it was like you could tell it was very influenced by the Batman Arkham video games. It was just kind of like the perfect amount of some people might say excessive amount of Batman violence.
Right.
I guess yeah, I like some kind of combination. I don't want to see Batman wrestling in the mud. That's not something I want to see in terms of let's take it all the way back to the origins. I want to see someone with some skill tussling, and I like part of that idea of trying to make things more realistic, but it's got its own drawbacks when you try to make things super real.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. To me, the fight scenes were a little sluggish. Like, Batman doesn't have to take a hit for everyone he fights. In theory, he should be skilled enough where he's knocking most of the guys down, and maybe occasionally takes a hit. But here he's really like slogging through all of his opponents. Something else, this Batman, I don't know if it's all Batmans. Is Gotham always supposed to be New York City? In this film, it's very clear that Gotham is New York City because there's Times Square that you see. There's also Madison Square Garden, which is called Gotham Square Garden, I believe, in the Batman movie. Is Gotham always New York City or just in this version of the film?
Pretty much. I mean, I believe the word Gotham predates Batman. Batman came out, I think, in 1949. And the word Gotham was coined by someone to be used interchangeably with New York to describe New York City. So I think it's always been kind of you could say alternate universe New York City.
Huh, very interesting. Something else, the architecture was very Gothic. I'm trying to think where it was. Batman's mansion is super Gothic, and there's I guess the funeral for the mayor. There's a lot of very Gothic architecture in the Batman movie that kind of gave it this dark kind of a visual setting like you might see in like a horror movie or something out of the Addams Family. And I know there's some of that in Batman. Do you think it was overdone in this or it was about right?
I didn't really notice. I have to watch it again. I mean, I was kind of trying to pay attention to this stuff while watching. I guess I like some scenes better than others. People have been saying that this is one of the best versions of Gotham City in terms of how it looks. It's supposed to look like this kind of, dingy, dirty, crime-ridden, Gothic, monolithic New York City, place that's kind of huge and imposing. So I don't remember exactly.
Right. Okay, so moving right along, the music in this Batman movie there's mostly a score, but there's also there's some song. I don't know who it's by. It sounds like a grunge band. Kind of doubt it's Nirvana, but it sort of has like a grungy vibe to it that plays at the beginning and the end of the movie. Do you have any thoughts on the music in the movie? Did it work for you? Did it irk you? Was it very plain vanilla?
I had different experiences with the music over the course of the film. I'd say, for the most part, I was not a fan. I found some parts of the soundtrack to be outright jarring, kind of taking me out of a scene that I was already having difficulty dealing with. It just felt like in certain parts of the movie that I could tell what they were going for in the soundtrack, trying to sound like Seven, like some kind of particular type of horror film, but it just wasn't meshing.
Oh,
The sound,
yeah.
was not
There's
meshing with what I was seeing.
there's a very like particular sound in the movie that to me, I forgot what it's called, is very reminiscent of the sound that you hear in The Shining. It's like a very classic horror film sound. It's like
Yes, that thing also.
yeah, it just goes again and again throughout the movie, and it's like, are they trying to make every single scene in the movie like a horror film scene when it's clearly not?
You could tell what they were going for, but you couldn't feel what they were going for.
Right, because like it had the sound, but like the scene you're watching didn't correlate to it.
Yeah, it's like the director just failed to communicate what he needed to give over whatever he was trying to relate. So he just wrote lots of exposition and very obvious dialogue to help the audience along, but it doesn't really work.
Right, I'm gonna have to agree with you on this. Something else that stood out to me is almost like the theme of Batman is the sound. It's like dun 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 dun. That was the theme. Like big bad Batman is coming. Dun 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 dun. And you know what that is? That's literally the Imperial March. But if you just leave out the middle, dun 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 dun, it's almost the same exact piece of music. It's just not as interesting.
I was thinking about that earlier, like how that sounded kind of similar to that. I think Ben Shapiro was saying something like it's the same as Christopher, like the Hans Zimmer theme. It's just the notes are backwards or something.
Right.
I'm not sure.
To me, it just kind of fell flat because it was like a very lame. It's like a lame version of the Imperial March. I think they could have just done a lot better with the score. And I don't know why this conjured up in my mind the car chase. It seems like every Batman movie has to have a car chase. What did you think of the Batmobile? I'm still not sure what I think about it. It almost looks like some sort of stock car or something. Some like half-baked stock car that shoots fire out of the back. What did you think of the Batmobile? What did you think of the car chase?
The Batmobile I kind of liked and didn't like, and you could tell the director again was going for this. It's an early Batman. He's not that technologically sophisticated, so his Bat car is his homemade racing car with things on it. and it stalls out, like he's about to chase the Penguin, and the whole car stalls out, and it's supposed to be like a joke or something. You're seeing Batman's early ineptitude that his car stalls out, but it's just one of those things that, again, didn't translate to me in a way that felt enjoyable. It's like, I see what you're doing, director, and I don't like it.
Right. Now, there's the scene he's chasing the Penguin, and he's kind of stuck in between all these different trucks, and he sees this just truck pulls in front of him with like a ramp, like whatever it's called, the type of truck that carries other trucks, a car transport. It doesn't carry other trucks, it carries cars. And it's empty, it's got the ramp, like in GTA, and he revs the engine, and I don't know, it just seemed a bit childish, that part. Although right after that, I thought was a very cool visual scene where the Penguin like thinks he got away. There's an explosion in his rearview mirror. There's no way Batman could have survived or gotten through that. And then the Batmobile like is flying through the fire and lands right behind him, and he freaks out. I thought that was a pretty cool scene visually. Although when he gets to the Penguin, he doesn't do anything, so it was kind of very anticlimactic.
I felt almost exactly the same way. Like, it was a cool scene visually. You could tell that, they worked hard on that scene. It looked real. It didn't look like lousy CGI. Like, you could tell that they were using CGI, but that it was very carefully implemented. It was like an exciting chase scene. Unfortunately, this chase and just about every other scene in the film that looks cool was spoiled in the trailer.
I guess it's a good thing I didn't see the trailer then.
Yeah, definitely. Because as much as I liked this scene, I'd already seen it. It was very prominent in the trailer.
Right. Now, I want to bring up there's an aspect to this film where you have Batman acting as a detective. He's in the lab. He's trying to figure things out. He's trying to solve the different clues left to him by the Riddler throughout the film. And that's something that I really liked. I'm following the Batman in his quest to solve the Riddler's riddles. And I thought that was really interesting to see Detective Batman. I was like, oh, wow, it's almost like I'm watching a detective TV show. I could almost see this movie, split into sections and, running as a TV show. Did you like that aspect to it? And then I want to bring it back to Nolan and how this compares to his stuff. Did you like Detective Batman, or just the other shortcomings of the film didn't make that work for you?
I like Detective Batman because that is a very authentic part of his character. After all, Batman first starred in DC Comics or Detective Comics. He was a detective from his inception. So I liked that part of it. But then when it actually came to what went on during those scenes, especially some of the longer ones, where Batman just seems kind of like a inept character. He's got issues understanding Spanish and Latin, and just like the kind of things that Batman would know.
Right. Right. Yeah, go ahead.
The very long dialogue scenes that are very, very boring, that just go on forever, that I guess are attached to the detective scenes, but I kind of forget they are because there's just so much talking.
Right. Okay. Now, before we jump into broader discussion of Batman and Christopher Nolan, I forgot to mention Alfred. Any thoughts on Alfred in this movie?
Um, I like what's his name? Gollum himself. I
Oh,
like Andy
really?
Serkis in the role. I
That's.
like Andy Serkis. Uh,
I had no idea that was Andy Serkis.
I think
Colin
Andy Serkis
himself.
is a good actor. I think he did well with what he was given, but I think he wasn't written properly. He just wasn't. He wasn't conceptualized or carried out properly. Just this guy who like cries a lot and he gets blowed up, but he lives, and it's just another one of those characters that didn't connect, that didn't feel like was done properly.
Right, right. To me, Alfred, I don't know, this version of Alfred didn't really work. He was too polished. To me, in my mind, I always have Alfred as he was portrayed in the animated Batman as sort of like a butler, wearing the tuxedo and really sort of following Bruce Wayne around because he was the butler to the Wayne family. And in this version of Batman, it's almost like he's Batman's boss, which really isn't the case. He's sort of the servant slash moral compass of Batman. He's not like Batman's superior, and it kind of seems that way in this version of the Batman. So to come full circle, before we like make comparisons with the Nolan films, what do you think this film did right in portraying Batman, and what did they do wrong portraying Batman from what you think Batman should be? Doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, just some thoughts and that idea of what you think Batman should be and what this film did with Batman.
About what the film did correct, I think I'd have to mull over that one for a while. Uh, in terms of what was the second part of that?
Well, either way, good or bad, in what your vision of what Batman is, which maybe like what do you think is the most authentic version of Batman? Would you say I would think maybe it's a conglomeration of what you see in more of the classic Batman comic books and the Batman animated series. Is that what you would consider the real archetypal Batman?
Yeah, 1980s Batman comic books written by the likes of Denny O'Neil, and getting into the early 90s with Batman the Animated Series, which is largely considered to be the most authentic interpretation of Batman ever put to screen. So
Right.
comic
So
books from that era, that show, and even to some degree Batman 1989, all of those things are kind of wrapped up in an authentic depiction of Batman.
right. So how does this film compare to what you think is a more authentic version of Batman, for good or bad?
This feels to me like a lot of other films that have come out over the past few years that are reboots. It feels like a fanfic, and I guess to some degree everything's a fanfic because this director is a fan of Batman, I guess, and uh, he directed a movie. But by fanfic, I mean like this alternate universe version of the character through a different lens, and this didn't feel like Batman to me. Nothing really came off as Batman.
All right. I hear. So I guess let this go direct to Christopher Nolan's Batmans. What do you think the Christopher Nolan Batmans did right that this movie did wrong? And yeah, let's just delve into that a bit. What do you think this movie took from the Nolan films? Why? I assume you think the Nolan films are far superior to this. So let's just talk about that.
Well, going back to Batman Begins, which I think was like 2007, maybe. That movie also took a little while to kind of establish itself. Like, it was so new. It was the first of the reboots in many ways. It started all these other franchises rebooting, and people didn't really know what that concept was exactly when this movie came out. So we were seeing a new guy playing Batman and a completely different director, and parts of it, you're wondering, like, is this a Batman movie? Does it feel like a Batman movie? I'm not sure. And I think by the end of the movie, it world builds well enough that you feel like this is authentically what a Batman movie or a Batman universe feels like. I think it does such a good job with developing its characters.
Mm-hmm.
With The Batman 2022, I felt like they had very poor character building. I never felt connected with any of the characters. I never really cared about what was happening with them. I didn't feel like I really understood what they were going through. It was just kind of, it was like reading dialogue off the page almost, watching what was happening on screen at times.
Right. What do you think this film took from the Nolan films that was trying to work with things that worked well with an audience? What part of Batman do you think was taken directly from the Nolan films and for this one?
Well, with what seems to have been the general thrust of these movies, of starting with Nolan, well, you could say starting with Batman 1989 to a certain degree, but then again with Nolan, is that Batman keeps on becoming more and more grounded. So you could definitely say this movie was inspired by the Nolan films to take an even more, so to speak, grounded and realistic take on the Batman.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I mean, of all the Batman films that have been made to date, this one definitely, to me, seems the most similar to the Nolan films. It seems like a more realistic version of Batman, and that's what I think the Nolan films did, was they took this character that lived in this goofy upside-down world who, in his own right was kind of a loony psychopathic character, and they tried to turn him into like a real person with someone relatable who could live in the real world, and it was highly successful. I mean, I saw the first Batman movie. Was it Batman Begins? I saw that one more than once, but the two ones that came after it, I didn't see multiple times. And most of Christopher Nolan's works, for me, they have a very high, they feel very epic. It's like, whoa, I just watched like an epic piece of film. They don't have a super high fun factor for me, but like they definitely seem like, epic works of filming. And in the, I don't know if it's the first Batman movie, but there's these kind of cool scenes where there's a crook and he's in the act of doing something, and then all of a sudden like this figure pulls him into the shadows, and that's like a really cool trick that they're like, oh wow, it's like this superhuman Batman, beating up the bad guys. I don't think you had as much of that in this film, where you're like, really rooting for like the awesome Batman. Do you think this film would have done better if Batman was portrayed as sort of a cooler, more professional sort of character that didn't like stumble around as much as he does?
Yeah, I mean, I think if the character was written with any charisma at all, it would have done something very positive for the film overall.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree. Batman really seems kind of like the life is drained out of him, almost like he's a vampire in in this film. And he's a little bit hard to relate to. He's just kind of like a piece of marble. And, I don't know, maybe that could work if, he just seemed like a real awesome fighter or tech or detective and whatever. But, in this movie, he doesn't seem to be any of those things. And, though, as the movie progresses, it seems like every step he takes is just falling further into the Riddler's plan. So he's really sort of failing as the movie progresses. Aside from that, I enjoyed the movie. I wouldn't say I love the movie. If I would rate the movie, I would rate it at a 6.5, a solid 6.5 out of 10. How would you rate the movie? And do you have anything else you want to discuss about the Batman? Anything that stood out to you about the film or not?
Well, I wrote a bit of a list while watching the movie, so I could share some ideas that I noted off that list.
I would love to hear.
And also some thoughts that I heard on podcasts that people are reviewing the film, just things that stood out to me.
Sure.
So this movie felt to me like someone adapted Batman into a Japanese manga, like a Japanese style comic book, and then back into a movie.
Interesting.
You have like this made for teenagers, made for brooding teenagers version of Batman, and Robert Pattinson really looks like an anime character.
Yes, he does.
Very pointed, angular jaw and nose, and the spiky hair. Like
Gotham,
like right out of one of those things. So that's kind of the feeling I have for this when I say it's like a fanfic, like alternate universe Japanese Batman, moody boy. What else? We talked about the music, very melodramatic. Getting to Nolan stuff, steals dialogue and visuals from Nolan movies. There's some of the same dialogue in this movie. I didn't write it down exactly where it was, but we're talking about like the same conversations from some of the Nolan films. And in terms of scenes, just ones that I noticed that I felt were very similar to the Nolan movies. We'll start with the fiery car chase. There's also a fiery car chase in the Dark Knight movie. They're in the tunnels, and like Joker fires what do you call it, like a bazooka?
Rocket launcher.
The Batmobile.
RPG.
And there's like an explosion and a ball of flame, and you see the Batmobile like shoot through. Some very similar imagery right there. You have another scene from that movie where Batman goes into a nightclub and he starts punching guys and doing his bat karate and throwing people off of the balcony.
Bad karate.
Exactly. They did that in The Dark Knight. Like that same scene. In this movie, there's a part with Batman flying up a staircase using his bat rope thing.
Yes.
And in the Nolan films, there's a scene where he has like this transmitter in his shoe. He presses it, he drops it down a staircase, and then the bats like swarm around him, and he jumps down the staircase. So it's almost like they did that scene
in reverse. Yeah.
And lost the bats. We already spoke about Paul Dano and just how similar the performance, parts of the performance, and the actual imagery was to Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight. So just a lot of things to me that looked very similar visually, and then there was also just pieces of dialogue that looked like they were just copy pasted. We talked about Robert Pattinson having not really any presence on film. He's not an imposing Batman.
No, not at all. He doesn't command a lot of respect.
Yeah, and the movie goes out of its way to show that.
Yes, it does.
I think that Pattinson looks weird in the suit. I don't know why they can't design a suit that just makes the person wearing it look cool, but they're doing weird things.
Yeah, he had this like flap over his nose that looked a little odd.
Yeah. Just weird stuff. Okay. So last on the list is like So Slow, I wrote. I mean, it's a 3-hour movie, and there's a lot of scenes that we're just listening to two characters talk, and it's not interesting. It goes on for a long time. It has to be that long.
Yes, was a very long movie. I actually watched it in one shot, which was
that's impressive.
Very impressive, yeah, but definitely a long movie. Definitely drags out a bit. And I think, once again, I didn't hate the movie. I liked the movie. I think it could have been a lot better than it was. Even with all the things that you didn't like about it, I think if they just made the Batman a cooler character and more intimidating, a better fighter, I think the audience would connect with like a really cool Batman. And unfortunately, this Batman, he's not cool. He's just he's not really amazing. And there's part of me that wants to connect with a Batman that's just like awesome, that people see and you're like really excited to see him on the screen and show up at a scene where something's going down that's bad, and you don't get that from this movie. I haven't really seen Pattinson in anything else, so not that I could think of, so I can't comment on how his performance here relates to his other performances. So yeah, all in all, like I said before, I think I'd give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. What rating would you give the movie on its own merits, and any closing thoughts?
So give the movie a rating. I don't know, maybe a 5.5. In terms of closing thoughts, just paraphrasing Kevin Smith, I watched him or listened to him do a podcast about that was at least partially about this movie, and he mentions that he's just a guy walking around in body armor. He is wearing hockey pads. That's Robert Pattinson in this movie. And he says we're not supposed to see Batman so exposed, so in the light. He's a creature of the night, the shadows.
Right.
Like
he needs to be a bit larger than life.
Yeah, and this is just not the way Batman's ever operated. He always comes out at night. He, he stays in the shadows. He stays concealed, and like you said, he needs to be somewhat enigmatic and in the dark. And I think this is the same kind of mistake that the Joker movie made, in that it's trying to lift the veil on something that we don't want a veil lifted on.
Right.
We need this character to stay somewhat mysterious and unknown. It's just that's the way it works best.
Right. Okay, awesome. I enjoyed talking about this film with you, and thanks so much for your time.
Sure thing. I enjoyed talking with you about it as well.
Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
You too.